Yeah, good to see you too, Bev. Essentially, this lawsuit is alleging that the term "the big lie," which refers to President Trump's, unfounded claims that he, in fact, won the presidential election and that it was stolen from him by Democrats and Joe Biden, is untrue. They say that it has Nazi connotations, that it leads to, connotations that simply do not paint the president in a accurate light. Now, of course, we know that the term "the big lie" has very much been used not only by journalists at CNN and other news organizations around the world, but also by Democratic operatives, Democrats on, working in politics here in the United States. So we know that there's been a bit of an effort to walk that term back by some in CNN. But we know that Donald Trump, for example, is very much trying to say that this was an effort to smear him and that it's not true.
Yeah. The thing is, Donald Trump is just surrounded by complications at the moment. He has so many legal battles. It's interesting that he wants another one in the hope of changing that reputation that he has garnered.
Yeah, so he's got all these legal problems, Bev. And on top of that, he's considering or strongly considering running for president in 2024. And then, of course, he's also trying to campaign and boost a lot of these Republican candidates running in the Senate and House and governor's races in 2022. So, he's got a lot going on and he's only adding more to that plate. But I would argue that in terms of CNN, this possibly could play well with his very conservative base. We know that CNN, over the past 6 or 7 years since President Trump launched his first presidential bid, has very much been painted by Trump and his allies as fake news, a network that is really out to get him, very much seen as the poster child for what he alleges is a biased media against him. So this very well could play well with his political base, but I think you're absolutely right. He has so many legal problems right now, a potential 2024 presidential bid, of course, the midterm. So it adds more to his plate.
Yeah. You're right about some of these candidates that are lining up sort of on his side of the political fence. And there's this really hardline anti-abortion Republican Senate candidate in Georgia who has run into all sorts of trouble.
All sorts of trouble. We know that Herschel Walker, the Republican nominee for Senate in Georgia, who is challenging incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock, essentially has been accused of paying for a former girlfriend's abortion, according to the Daily Beast, which published this report last night here in the United States. This goes directly against what Herschel Walker and many Republicans and conservatives stand for, like you said. Very hardline anti-abortion. We're happy that Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decision that once legalized abortion at the federal level here in the United States, has been overturned. So it really flies directly in Herschel Walker's face and could potentially paint him as a hypocrite. Now, Herschel Walker is, of course, denying these allegations, very much pushing back against him. But he is a candidate that has really been dealing with a number of very negative news stories about him, including stories about him having, children out of wedlock that have popped up and such. So that's something he's been battling. Now, I would argue, and my colleague Max Green would have reported on this at The Hill, over the past couple of months, this campaign has really done a good job of turning itself around, trying to present itself as a legitimate campaign, focusing on issues like inflation, for example. So this new news story doesn't do much to, boost his candidacy when he is running in one of the most highly contested Senate races on the map here in the United States in 2022.
Yeah. And the midterms are not far away now. I mean, do we know yet just how these very conservative, in some cases quite extreme election deniers too, are going to be lining up for this election and how that's going to play for the Republicans?
It's a good question because we know that, for example, in Arizona in the governor's race, you have Carrie Lake, a former TV news journalist, actually. She is an election denier. She is running, and polls show her very close with her Democratic opponent. We have a number of House candidates, for example, who are election deniers, and also some candidates in the Senate. What's interesting, Beth, though, is a lot of the Republican establishment, not Trump-aligned Republicans, but Republicans maybe aligned with former Vice President Mike Pence, were boosting candidates that were not election deniers, because they believe that these candidates would be a better fit to run in a general election against a Democrat. But you saw lots of Democrats actually pouring in money for these election denier candidates, thinking they would be easier to beat in the general election. However, you're seeing this really, a lot of these very close races play out. So, it's not only the Republicans that could be impacted by this. If a lot of these election deniers win their general elections, that's going to reflect at some point on the Democrats, who have very much been trying to boost them because they think they would be an easy candidate.
Yeah. So interesting. It was funny to notice in Maggie Haber's new book that among the documents that Donald Trump took to Mar-a-Lago with him were these, what had been termed love letters between him and Kim Jong-un. It is interesting to think that he felt that that was personal property.
It's very interesting to think he felt that was personal property. Look, it was definitely one of the biggest moments of his presidency. Meeting with Kim Jong-un, going into, North Korea, the North Korean border with South Korea. That was something that his presidency touted, very much covered here in the United States. But I think President Trump views himself as someone who, unlike other U.S. presidents, was able to connect with this very mysterious and, strong man figure. And we know that it's not just Kim Jong-un who President Trump seems to admire. I mean, in the past, he's said very admirable things about Russian President Vladimir Putin, for example. So, it seems like he admires a lot of these strong men, almost dictator-like presidents and leaders across the world. So it's not particularly surprising that he has saved those letters. I think he viewed himself as an American who could very much reach across the table to these figures.
Yeah. Great to see you, Julia. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.